once again with Pops here at Pops Corner. The man, Richard Soren, to my left. Today we're going to be talking about somebody that shined very, very early. And also, like many times, when a star burns that hot, it also burns out a little bit early too.
Yeah.
Dave Pasanella. In certain circles, I've heard him considered and stated as the strongest, most explosive strength athlete they'd ever seen. I've heard that from a few coaches. I heard that he was capable of doing gymnastic feats, backflips and things after squatting over 1,000 pounds. Unbelievable physique. Apparently a very, very intelligent man. What was your take on an athlete such as Dave Pasanella? And what was – well, answer that first and we'll go from there.
From what I gathered, everything you said is true. I'm trying to think of how many times I was actually around him. One particularly stands out in my mind when he did some amazing lifting in an exhibition, and I'll go into that. But he was the right height, the right body configuration. Like I said, he worked hard and he was smart, but he had a great deadlift, he had a great squat. So you got the two things that usually don't go together.
Right.
And his bench, I am thinking he did around 600. I'm not 100% sure about that. But the few times I was around him, I was impressed with, he wasn't a giant muscular person, but he was an efficient-looking lifting machine. Mm-hmm. He had the things that he could have carried a lot further on. I met him the first time in Charleston. There was an exhibition at a gym, and there was some. Corey Everson was there. It was a grand opening.
That's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah, she was something else. And he was going to do some squatting, and I'll never forget. He had a white T-shirt on that said Weeder on it, and I guess they were at the time sponsoring him, getting him up off the ground, and actually. He started squatting so much that they had to find bigger bars, stronger bars. They call it a Pasanella bar.
Yep.
So he brought his own bar with him, and he was going to do some squats. Well, I said, well, he's strong, and he's pushing the world's records. I'm going to see what he could do. Well, long story short, he started with that bar, which I guess weighed 65 pounds, and he started piling on 100-pound plates. And I'm going like, gee, this is jumping up here pretty quick. And the crowd really started getting into it. Well, when he hit 900, he did it like 3 reps, no problem. And I went like, wow. Now, they were parallel, but this was big weight for the time. And he wasn't really taxing himself. So he starts piling more on there. I don't know if he did 1,000. But then he puts on, and I was scared to death because they said, would you help spot? I don't want to catch 1,000 pounds. I don't want to.
Right.
But I was one of the 4 or 5 people that was asked to squat, and I was nervous. So we stacked the weights on. 1,100 pounds he had on there. And I think I still have some pictures that they snapped while we were doing it. I think my wife took them. And he took that 1,000 pounds for a ride, 1,100 for a ride, down to just a shade above parallel. You know, it was down there. And he motored through them. He was, everyone was just in awe. I never heard anyone squatting that much at that time or even close to it. I saw what I thought was going to be the new standard in powerlifting for total and for being the new superstar. He went on to coach at Georgia Tech, which was a good customer of ours. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I heard he had passed. And I was just devastated because, as you said, he was a bright star on the horizon, only getting bigger and brighter. Mm-hmm. He was involved in a automotive wreck, and it was just gone. And it's like the biggest, strongest thing is just gone.
I think that we have moments like that where, Superman becomes human again.
Yeah.
And we just had that, and I don't want to get too far off subject here, but we just had this passing Konstantin Konstantinov's.
Yes.
And for me, this is a man that I couldn't tell you the number of videos that I watched of his. I couldn't tell you the impact of seeing him pull a weight that most struggle with, like you say, effortlessly. It didn't make sense. And to see these young men, and I call Konstantin young, I mean, he was in his 40s, but to see these young, strong, hulking heroes types go well before you can even fathom that they should go,
yeah.
I think in some way, it brings us back down to earth.
Yes.
But it also makes them even more impressive because in spite of their fragility, in spite of the fact that we all go to the same place, while they were here on earth, they did something incredible.
Yeah. What drew you so much to Double K? I mean, it was not, I think his best was 946.
Mm-hmm.
That's a deadlift to dream for, but it's not the most ever done. But he had, from what videos I saw and from his presence, he made a statement for others to aspire to.
Mm-hmm.
And what moved you about him other than someone else deadlifting 940?
I think guys like KK and Pasanella, people that they're Renaissance men in a way.
Yeah.
Dan Green, phenomenal lifter, posted about Konstantin, reciting poetry,
yeah.
and sharing songs and just the ability to shed that cape
yeah.
of Superman and also be something that in many ways is frowned upon and seen as weakness, seen as vulnerability to show emotion and to show an appreciation for the arts. Those things typically don't coincide with strength.
If you don't have to posture, you're really strong.
Exactly. And I think, again, I don't want to get too far away from Pasanella,
yeah.
but that's one thing that he was just a guy trying to make a living as a coach. He loved the sport.
Absolutely.
He loved coaching others. His ability to convey an idea.
Yeah.
I think when we're lucky enough to see these people beyond the platform and start to understand them as men, I think that's where the connection point is for me. And looking at guys like a Doug Young, who was a train engineer, a train conductor, and then guys like Konstantin, the intensity, the ability to weather that rage for those perfect storms when it all comes together over the barbell, and then to walk away and to sit down and have a wine selection in front of you and know the wine list. Something like that is very much a KK kind of thing. And I think in the strength world, we need to recognize these lives of men like Dave Pasanella,
yeah.
Konstantin, and the list could go on and on and on. But what we're faced with as strong men is sometimes we get pigeonholed into an identity.
Yeah.
Do you think that those little reminders, as devastating as they may be, push us forward as men?
I think so. And to refer back to Dave, a good friend told me one time, your life is almost like putting your finger in a bowl of milk. And while your finger's in there, it's part of that milk, part of that bowl. But when you pull it out, the ripples come together, and all of a sudden the milk is settled, and you're gone. When I visited Dave at Georgia Tech, he was already drawing into his program. He was working out along with the athletes, not just coaching them. He was inspiring them. He had to have special things made, special bars. Actually, which really touched me, he had 12, because that was his aspiration, squat 1,200. He had 1,200-pound plates made with Georgia Tech on them, just for him to train on so he could pile enough on the bar. And after he passed, the next coach was there, and he said, I noticed the plates piled up in the corner. And I said, gee, what those are Dave's plates. He goes, yeah. He says, you want them? I mean, I couldn't be more honored to know that someone that special that had that much potential to give to life was just snuffed in a moment, pulling that finger out of the milk. And a little bit of Dave lives right downstairs.
Right.
And every time I walk by there, I think about him and say, what if, or what could he have done in his time? How many athletes could he have inspired to be stronger, better, or even powerlifters like he was? It was a switch turned off before, the light needed to go out.
So I'm going to take this in a direction that I wasn't fully expectant to go, but I think so. There's a book that I'm going to reference. It's called Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex, and it talks a lot about this character of Superman. And I think guys, and I don't want to try to beat my own chest, but guys that walk to a little bit of a beat of a different drummer, an alpha type male. And the scenario that's set up within the book is to become Batman, Bruce Wayne has to put on an outfit. To become Spider-Man, Peter Parker has to put on an outfit. Superman, his costume is Clark Kent. He's just a guy trying to fit into a world that he's not made for. And I think as men, and men like Dave Pasanella, guys that burn a little hotter, guys that do things at a little bit different level, they struggle to fit in, and the barbell quiets some of that. And I think then you're left with, okay, I've become this person that I've always felt like I was, this hulking individual, but now I have to be this mild-mannered
to fit in. Do you feel that you yourself or other lifters or me, do you feel a need that there has to be someone you can look up to, or can you ever be all that you need? Do we need others like that?
I think so, because I think if we don't have others to strive to be like or to admire, then that puts a hell of a lot of pressure on us to be the carrier of the load. And I think at times we know we're doing that in our own lives, but I think having the ability to turn that off and admire others like a Pasanella or a KK or a Kaz or a Tom Platz or an Arnold or whoever it is, I think we all need our heroes.
Right.
And I think that...
Are heroes repeatable? Could there be another Kaz? Could there be another, as I said, Babe Ruth? Could there be another Ed Cohn? Or have they filled up a certain place that parallel Spider-Man and Hulks have to fill?
I think that there's something really powerful about that effect. We'll call it the Babe Ruth effect. He was a drunk. He was a womanizer. He was overweight. He wasn't necessarily the greatest looking guy.
Who are you talking about anyway?
But in spite of all that, he could hit a baseball. He could throw a baseball. And that connection gave everybody enough to say, I got a little bit of the Babe in me. Because as men, we are flawed. As men, we do make
Absolutely.
mistakes. But to see another man rise above that, get on a baseball field and do something great, or a Mike Tyson with all his demons, to see him at a level to where he was probably the most feared man on earth in that setting, is what I think has always driven me forward. In spite of myself, I was able to become good at something, and I've been very, very open about my struggles, very open about some of the things that I've seen and failed at, and it was always like, if I could just match my life to the level of achievement as this, I'll be okay. But I could not do that in balance. It was only after the injury that I worked as hard on being a person as I did at the achievement of my sport.
Do you think failure is part of the positive process?
Has to be. It has to be, because if everything was easy, if everything was without fail, we would be perpetually going forward. Right. And I think as a human, part of our existence is defined in how we pick ourselves up.
Does a man look at things more in an objective or subjective manner, would you think? Or let's say how you viewed life. Are you totally just analytical and here's the facts and this is what it is? Or do you have okay, the Babe had this and he had that, and maybe he's closer to a real man I could identify with, but he was great at some things. Mm-hmm. And that's what maybe was an ideal model for so many that needed that at that given time. Like McGuire, when McGuire came on the scene, baseball was dead.
Yeah.
And he's hugging his kid, and he's hitting the big forms, he's hitting these balls. All these things awakened parts in people, positive parts, that rose everyone up a little higher.
It did, because for since 61, when Maris hit 61 home runs, yep, that was the definition of greatness at that level. The home run is the greatest hit a person can achieve individually, whether it's a grand slam or it's an individual run. The home run is the mark of power. Baseball was dead. There was a strike. It was a post-strike era. I think there was a lot going on in the world at that time that was uncertain. But here for a season, especially towards the end of the year, the season's changing into fall, temperatures are cooling, and here you've got this guy that's catching fire.
That's it.
And it's just boom, boom, boom. The balls just keep flying. And then throw into the mix Sammy Sosa.
Sure.
There's the guys that were pulling for Sosa. There's a villain and a good guy. Depending on where you're standing, somebody's the hero and somebody's the villain.
Was Maris a villain or a hero? Because he did push aside the Babe in some ways. I don't think anyone could. And I remember my dad loved baseball, and he would twice a year save up enough to sit behind home plate and watch the Yankees. I didn't know what was going on, but I would see Maris hit, Mantle hit, all Yogi Berra out there running around, and I didn't know the greatness I was seeing.
It about killed him. Did you know that? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it was nights filled with alcohol and drugs, and again, and you look at the constant theme of these things.
Because he looked, in many ways,
he was losing his hair.
Yeah, he was challenging God almost.
And I don't know that it's the fact that it was the 61 home runs, or it's, am I deserving of passing the Babe? I feel like there's, as I've approached people, or you get a compliment of, man, your numbers are greater than this lifter. I don't really qualify myself as a greater lifter than Doug Young, but I surpassed his numbers. But the things he did and the time that he did them.
Timing.
Exactly. And I think as lifters, as men, as humans, we need those people to look at and identify that they are superior for a moment, but also to catch them on the fall when they're just people like us trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I think that's the beautiful balance of it all. And I think, and I know this has gone a little bit deeper and maybe a little more peripheral than what I had intended, but what I know about Dave, this is what's always inspired me to be drawn to him, is the fact that he wasn't just a lifter. He was a fascinating guy. He had a wide variety of interests. And just like us, he had a vision that burned so hot and a belief that was so strong. And in many, many ways, he burned so hot that the light went out before it even had a chance to fully shine.
He set a table for all of us to do better and improve and change some things. And he set that table that he never got to eat at. But I guarantee he's somewhere smiling and knowing that the lifting world and the world in general is a better place because that he was there trying and swinging at the wall.
I think that's all we can hope for, is that if we're lucky enough, even after we're gone, that table still feeds people.
Yep.
I think that's life in a nutshell.
Agreed.